It's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the 6th turn of the Shadowtech Goddess, subtitled Cat. Part 3, Chapter 5, A Dedicated Student. I'm dropping this video a little early. I usually try to keep them a week apart, but next week I will be in Chicago for Comic-Con and otherwise indisposed, so I'm going to drop this a little bit early. This is a shorter chapter, not quite as long as the past few, so this shouldn't take too long at all. As you recall, in our last episode, Kat managed to get Lord Belmont to take her to his home in the Tyrol lands of Cana. Ate rather sloppily, unscrewed lids for him, that wasn't impressive, and then decided just to prolong the ordeal by running and leading him on a merry chase. She then discovered his library and his manor, and caught the idea of staying valuable to Lord Belmont and forcing him to teach her to read before she discloses the information that she knows pertaining to the demon in blue lights. Lord Belmont was suitably outraged, but if he wants revenge, he's gonna have to play ball with Kat. So that's where we are. Let's dig in, shall we? Part 3, Chapter 5, A Dedicated Student. Time passed in Belmont Manor. Stenstrom fully expected Kat to either tire of this daily game or attempt some sort of treachery. But after a week had gone by, she showed no signs of doing either. Every morning at 7 bells, she was up and ready to begin. She had been given a small room in an isolated section of the manor, a room loaded with monitoring equipment and holy stones should she try something funny. Every morning she rose, washed in her small bathroom, and ate. She had significant issues with her bed. The mattress gave her fits. She swore it was painfully uncomfortable and terrifying to sleep in, preferring the floor. They eventually changed out her mattress with an extremely hard one, which she grew to grudgingly accept. Also, getting her to make use of bath soap as she washed was the most difficult part, as she disliked strong floral scents. Giving her fragrance-free soap solved that problem, and the odd smell she once bore vanished. Her filthy green clothes had been cleaned, and they gave her several changes of gray workman's clothes to supplement her wardrobe. She had mastered the art of using a knife and fork, but she still had a bad habit of sitting up on all fours like a cat. Shoes had been made available to her, but she mostly shunned them. Her lessons were from 9 until 15 bells. Things did not go completely smooth, however. There were several drama-filled blow-ups in the library where he assumed the jig was up at last. She got frustrated several times as he tutored her, taking the book he was using as a teaching aid and blasting it into shreds with a burst of Shadowtech. Then they came to grips, Stenstrom expecting her to fight to the death or commence creating mayhem. But she centered her tantrums on him, the two of them sometimes bloodying each other like cage fighters. And invariably, after a minute or two of punching, kicking, and wrestling, she calmed and resumed her seat, ready to continue. If he was bleeding, she would always try to attend to his wounds first, before continuing. If she was bleeding, she would expect him to attend to hers. "Why are you bothering with this?" he would ask, panting, dabbing her face with a cloth. "Because I wish to read this book," she would reply, pointing at the red-covered atlas that sat on her desk. In the evenings, after dinner, he would continue her lessons. He was amazed how little Kat knew about anything, She was a virtual blank slate, waiting to be filled. Therefore, her evening lesson was an attempt to furnish her with basic knowledge, consisting of remedial arithmetic, teaching left hand versus right hand, remedial dining etiquette, remedial geography, remedial astronomy, remedial flora and fauna. And Lyra had to assist with several more modest topics: basic feminine hygiene, the proper use of one's bed sheets, the proper wear of ladies' garments and accessories, best bathroom practices, after Kat created a near panic one evening on the patio. The evening sessions often went late and often got quite lively. Despite everything, Stenstrom found he was enjoying himself teaching Kat to count, and her left from her right, teaching her the names of the moons, the stars, everything. No topic, no matter how innocuous, was out of bounds. Kat was given a strict set of boundaries in the manor, and she was not permitted to cross. She was allowed in the library, the mostly empty north wing, where her room was located, the small guest dining quarters, and the patio. She was not allowed anywhere else. Amazingly, Kat observed the restrictions placed upon her without fuss. She had also been given a job, helping out in the kitchens during midday, doing whatever was needed. She earned 1 sesterce per day. Additionally, Stenstrom was being hounded by Professor Sherlamp. His week had come and gone. She was impatient for him to come to her in Calvert as he had promised. Yet he would not leave his home unattended until the black hat was gone. He wrote the professor back, making up an excuse, which did not please her in the slightest. Time continued. Fits of occasional temper aside, Kat was a remarkably determined student. After a week or so, she nearly had the alphabet mastered, the letters W, S, and Z giving her the hardest trouble. He came into the library one day after lunch, and she was prancing about, bouncing from table to table like a nimble sprite. He thought she had gone mad. She leapt in front of him and held out a piece of paper. "I have written my name," she announced proudly. He looked at the paper. Written in a rough, childlike script was Kat, K-A-T. Close enough for now. Stenstrom and Lyra strolled down the walkway, looking out on the green. Fall was just around the corner. Such a pretty time in Tyrol. The trees waiting to burst into color. "So where is she?" Lyra asked. "I gave her a task to accomplish, and I'm fairly certain she's sitting in the library right now performing it." He could see Gwendolyn's little stones surrounded by red and white roses on the hillside. The roses were looking poorly, with several bare spots. The roses needed tending. He had been neglecting them. Kat had been taking up most of his time. "She is very committed. I don't think I'm really surprised, though," Lyra said. "Why?" "Well, it was obvious from the start. She clearly craved your attention. Why go to all this trouble if she didn't? She tried to kill me in Clovis." "Did she? You're more of an expert on black hats than I am. But I am told they don't simply come out and fight somebody. They hide, leave little STTs all over the place, and let their shadow tech do the fighting for them. If she willingly came to grips with you, maybe it's because she wanted to get your attention. Or perhaps she just wanted to touch you or something." "Touch me?" "Yes, you handsome fellow, you," Lyra smiled. "Are you intentionally playing dumb, or are you just making excuses?" "What excuses?" "You're trying to make excuses to deny yourself the fact that you like Kat, that you're becoming fond of her. I'll admit it, I like her a lot. She makes me laugh. I'm glad she's here." He turned to gaze at Gwendolyn's distant stone. "She loved you, Belle, Lady Gwendolyn, but she's gone. You're too young to become an old hermit. I certainly don't want that for my brother, and I don't think she would have wanted that for you either." She lit up. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think Professor Sherlamp was right about the Covis, how it could help you. Maybe Kat is a Covis. Have you thought of that?" "Of course not. What makes you say that?" Because you're not moping around like you were before. You're not depressing me anymore with your half-dead antics. I actually caught you laughing the other day during Kat's evening session. Don't try to deny it. You like watching her reaction to new things as much as I do. She pinched his cheek. And mostly because you seem like my brother again, not the soulless shell you'd become. I'm grateful to her for that. They continued their walk. Stenstrom walked into the library. He had several lessons he had prepared the previous evening for Kat to try. She was a compliant house guest and an eager student, and surprisingly, as time went by, he was becoming an eager teacher. He found himself creating little lessons for her to perform with gusto. He found himself thinking about the lessons while at dinner or while prowling the grounds of his estate, and it was with a hint of pride that he was pleased with her progress. She knew her alphabet for the most part and was beginning to sound things out. Odd. His shell of morbid emptiness inhabited only by himself, the demon in Gwen's corpse, was largely gone. Days went by when he didn't think of her once. Kat was filling things up. The Covis. Professor Sherlamp had said, "The Covis will strengthen you." Kat. Perhaps Lyra was right. Perhaps. Kat was not there that morning. Her usual chair by the window was empty. "Kat," he called, looking around. Her tabletop was neat and well organized. Her stack of blank pages sat squarely in the center. Several of her favorite pens were lined up to the far right, and the prize red-bound atlas was sitting off to the left side. She was favoring her right hand to write with. But no Kat. He checked the guest dining room, and she was not there either, though the staff said she had dined there for breakfast that morning as usual. Her apartment in the north wing was empty, bed made. There was her basket sitting in the corner. He wondered what was in it. Though curious as to what might be kept within, he backed away, leaving the basket unopened. He would respect her privacy. Stenstrom went down into the southern wing to get Lyra so she could help him look. He heard laughter coming from her room. Peering in through her partially open door, he saw Kat sitting at Lyra's boudoir. Kat was well out of bounds. She was not allowed in the southern wing. Lyra was hard at work combing Kat's mess of white blonde hair. What an amazing transformation. Some of it Lyra had sheared off, especially at the temples, leaving Kat with short whitish stubble over her ears and up the side of her head. But over the top and back of her head, Lyra had somehow gotten most of the tangles out and tamed it. Her hair was thick and lovely, pulled back out of her face and held with a felt clip. Lyra had also painted Kat's face and rosed her lips with powders. The gray workman's clothes Kat had been wearing were not present. She sat there in one of Lyra's old dresses, a nice red one. She saw him through the door and smiled. "Good morning, G." She called him G, short for garment. He had come to accept it. He had to admit, Kat was very pretty. Coming from the wild in a significant state of dishevelment, he hadn't previously noticed Kat at all. His proper Belmont upbringing surely had biased his view of her. She certainly hadn't matched any of the aspects of beauty or grace he had been taught to appreciate. But now, cleaned and groomed, she seemed almost like a different person, one who demanded an immediate reassessment of her beauty. Her head had a lovely shape, long, slender neck, nice cheekbones, well-proportioned facial features, handsome chin, an interesting demure nose, jade-like eyes, and a fascinating lattice-like shadow mark of jet black that accented her eyes and skin tone. Her features weren't such that they grabbed one right away. They took time to appreciate. His sister Natalie had been like that, never one to attract a gentleman at the beginning of a ball, but always had many to choose from by the end. And here was Kat, all cleaned up, a deceptive, end-of-the-ball beauty. Her accent was also changing. Her guttural, barking sort of speech was mostly gone. From listening to the cooks jabber in the kitchens in the evenings, She was developing a charming Tyrol drawl similar to what his mother had once spoken with aplomb, mixed with a hint of that earthy wildness she had before. Her voice was becoming quite lovely to listen to. Her skin, cleaned and bathed, was snowy white, and she was filling out, gaining several pounds of healthy weight. He looked around. "What's going on in here?" "I'm sorry I'm late for my lesson. Please don't be angry with me," she said. "You're a bit out of bounds, Cat," he said. "It's my fault, Belle," Lyra said. "I invited her to my apartment. I wanted to get Cat something decent to wear for a change, and decided to have a go at her hair." "Am I in trouble, G?" Cat asked. He laughed. "No, I don't see why we can't expand your area of roam a bit. You've earned it. You've worked hard." Cat gave him a large, toothy grin. Look at her teeth. They had been a crooked, discolored mess, but now they were straight and glittering white after 2 visits to the Hospitallers in Tyrol. "See, Cat? I'd figured he'd see reason," Lyra said. Now, Cat's hair was a challenge. It probably had never seen a comb the whole of her days. Some of it was impossible. I had to chop parts off. But most I salvaged. And then we started talking. Talking about what? Cat, basking in the chair, lazily spoke. "I saw one of the cooks doing something that confused me. I was asking Lyra about it." Lyra patiently smoothed Cat's hair, continuing to free it from its remaining burrs and snarls. It became thicker and lovelier with each pass of the comb. Cat saw Eleanor from the kitchens kissing one of the boys delivering groceries behind the larder the other day. Did she? They were pressing their mouths together. Kissing, as Lyra called it. "What is kissing?" Cat asked. "Go on, Belle, tell her," Lyra said, smiling. He thought a moment. "Kissing is something people do to express affection for one another." "Have you ever kissed anybody, G?" Stenstrom blushed a bit. "Yes, Cat, I have." "Does kissing hurt?" she asked, interested. Stenstrom laughed. "It can, if not performed properly." Lyra agreed as she pulled the comb through Cat's hair. "It certainly can. Remember that boy from Wiln I was seeing last summer? The boy was a biter. Terrible. The worst." "What were you doing kissing the boy from Wiln?" he asked. "What are you, mother, all of a sudden, Belle? I kiss lots of boys. Sorry to burst your bubble." "Show me," Cat asked, shuffling in her seat. "It sounds interesting. The cook seemed to be enjoying herself the other day. I like you, G. Come over here and get a kiss." Stenstrom weighed his options. The thought of kissing Cat was intriguing, but now wasn't the right moment. "Perhaps another time," he said. Lyra just shook her head. Cat attempted to press the matter with further questions, but then relented and moved on to another topic. "Lyra says you can do magic, G. She says you can make things appear from nowhere." She looked utterly content, sitting there letting Lyra comb her hair. "Yes, I can. So can she. We have the same training." "Can you do something for me?" He thought about it. "The morning is escaping us. Your lesson awaits." "Don't be a party pooper, Belle," Lyra said, struggling with a knot. "Show her something. My hands are full." He thought about it a moment, then shook his hands. Several holy stones appeared between his fingers. Cat was impressed. "How'd you do that?" "I can't say. It's a skill we all have. Of course, it's not shadow tech." "Can you teach me?" "It's a family secret. You have to be in the family to know how it's done." "Ah," she said, her eyes becoming a little dreamy. "I see." Cat smiled and waved her hand. A bit of shadow tech formed between her fingers and shaped itself into a flower. "Here, G, take it. It won't hurt you." The flower wasn't black, as shadow tech normally was. Instead, it was a brackish gray. Her shadow tech was changing, just as Countess Sigillis of Blanchford's shadow tech had changed from black to silver. He had seen it with his own eyes during his days aboard the New Faith. Carefully, Stenstrom reached out and took the flower. It twisted in his fingers, reached out and gave him a kiss on the cheek. "I'm magic too," Cat said. Cat's lessons progressed. She sat there staring at the simple phrases in front of her, leaning over her work, carefully sounding out the words, tracing her progress with her finger. Her black, sharpened fingernails were gone, replaced with trimmed red ones, more of Lyra's handiwork. She struggled with one sentence, ones with lots of W's. Stenstrom stood over her, patiently adding his encouragement. She eventually got through it. She had read her lesson for the day. She stood in triumph, and they embraced. She looked up at him expectantly, caught up in the moment. "Gee," she whispered. He felt her heart beating through his coat and shirt. Kat was so pretty. He could feel the alluring tug of Shadowtech moving through her body. Captain Davidge, married to a notable Shadowtech female, once told him in private, "Kissing a Shadowtech female is like kissing a live power socket. The jolt it provides never ceases to amaze." He could kiss Kat, and probably more right now, whisk her to his bedroom and continue her education undercover. Look at her. Eyes large, mouth parted. She was ready. Lyra had said it. Perhaps she wanted to touch you. He remembered the first time he had kissed Gwen on the ballroom floor on Baz. The moment struck him, and he had kissed her. But Gwen could take care of herself. Kat was... No, he couldn't. How dare he think such things? Kat was his student, a guest in his home, and she ought to be treated with the proper respect. He pulled away. Without excusing himself, he left the room. And with that, we conclude Part 3, Chapter 5, A Dedicated Student. It seems maybe Ramanalesta made a good choice. Kat's Covis effect seems to be working. Lord Stenstrom isn't a depressed, morose shell anymore. He's moving on. The pain he felt, for the most part, is gone in teaching Kat how to read and teaching her most everything else, from basic arithmetic to geography to astronomy. He's moving on. He's recovering. He'll probably always mourn Gwen, but it should be in the proper nostalgia. And as time goes on, as he learns more about her, he's becoming more fond of Kat. And as we see, Kat finally has shed her filthy mop-like appearance that she had bore, and she's now attired, as she will throughout the rest of the book, wearing dresses and gowns of the Belmont style, with her hair shaved in a mohawk. The mohawk, just for some inside information, came from artist Carol Phillips, the queen of the League of Elder. Carol does all the covers for the League of Elder books and a lot of interior illustrations as well. And she came up with this beautiful, iconic picture of Kat with her wind-blown mohawk kind of shooting forward like a horse's mane. And that was just one of many design sketches Carol drew of Kat with different hairstyles, tried all kinds of things. I've posted some of those developmental pictures here in the various readings. Eventually, I just picked the mohawk. I thought that looks interesting. Let's go with that. And as is usually the case with Carol and artwork, I incorporated the mohawk into the story. I can't really imagine Kat anymore without thinking of her with a mohawk. And when Kat first appeared in Book 8 in the Shadowtech Goddess, she didn't have a mohawk. She had just a big head of, platinum blonde hair. In this book, she has her trademark wind-blown mohawk, and now that's been given to her. Gone are the dreads, gone is the stink and the filthy clothes. She is now becoming more civilized as time goes on. And even though this is a short chapter, a fair amount of time is passing between each of the narrative breaks, and there's quite a few in here. So time is passing, and as time passes, Lord Stenstrom's just becoming more attached to Kat. He's becoming fond of Kat, and perhaps more. She has proved herself to be a dutiful student, and one who can be trusted, one who will follow the rules given to her, and who will finish what she starts out. She asked him to teach her to read, and so far that is going well. We will see how things continue next week. Actually, it's going to be a little longer than a week because, as I said, I will be in Comic-Con next week, so it'll be a while before I get to the next chapter, but we will do it. Part 3, Chapter 6, The Ibana Ball. And we are actually almost done with Part 3 of the book. Not a whole lot of chapters, only 2 more chapters, and then we get to the final part, Part 4, which leads into the exciting conclusion of the book. And we see where this is headed, where Lord Belmont, Stenstrom, and Cat as a team must face the demon in blue lights. We'll see how that goes. Anyways, I'm off to Comic-Con. This is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.